But let's have a look at Peter Tobin, the press, a lot of involvement in that as well. Do you want to start us off, Jane, because you had a lot, probably more to do it with us too? Yeah? You want to set the scene, Tom? You set the scene for us.
My involvement with Peter Tobin was I was a divisional chief superintendent out in West Lothian, which we used to call East Lanarkshire because it was much more akin to the west of Scotland than the east. And one very, very cold night, 10th of February it was, 1989. Was it 89 or 90? 89?
No, top.
Vicky?
90.
1990. We got a call out about a missing person. A young girl had gone missing from the Bathgate area. Bathgate, small county town. And Bathgate, even in midsummer, is a cold place. Well, I can tell you that night, it was absolutely bitterly cold. I can remember it yet. We went out looking for it. And Vicky was a lovely wee girl, came from near Falkirk, had been visiting relatives in Livingston, had to change buses and was waiting on a bus home. The roads were impassable with ice and snow. There were very few vehicles on the road. And Vicky had just disappeared off the face of the earth. She was not a wee girl that was prone to running away. She was 15 years old. She was a wee girl. She wasn't a young woman, if you know what I mean. She wasn't mature in that sense. So we knew she hadn't run away. We knew she hadn't run away, and we feared right from the outset that harm had come to her, not least because of the weather. It was so bitterly cold, nobody could have survived for long. And so we set in train a missing person investigation. And funnily enough, there was a TV show on about Tobin, and somebody, I didn't see it, but somebody phoned me up and said, "Oh, we saw you on the telly." A very young Tom Wood to do with the searches. We were searching. Now, what we know now is that when you're searching for a missing person like that, you adopt what they call the bullseye principle. You start in the middle and you work out. And so because we didn't think there was much chance of a vehicle taking her away because of the roads, we started to search houses. And we started right from the place she was last seen, the bus stop in the main street in Bathgate, and we started searching houses. And I mean, I don't mean just knocking on the door and asking whether we go in. I mean going in anyway, searching everywhere, searching attics, searching garages, searching everything, because we feared that she might have been so cold that she'd probably maybe gone and taken shelter somewhere. And if she had done that, then she'd have been dead within hours because it was so cold, although she was quite well dressed for the winter. So we did that. Later we found out that Peter Tobin, who got caught for another murder many years later, was actually living very close to where Vicky was last seen. He was not on our radar. He was not on any kind of watch list. We did not have him on our intelligence at all. We did not know anything about him. But it's pretty certain that as we were reaching out and spreading out from that bullseye, searching houses and searching lofts and garages and everywhere else, that he took fright and he fled, taking Vicky's body with him.
Jane? You were involved in the inquiry much later than that, when he was caught in Glasgow, in the church, the Polish girl.
Yep.
Wasn't? Yeah, you tell us.
So I was at work one Saturday. I was at the Sunday Mail by this point, and we got a phone call to say that there was a lot of police activity at St Patrick's Church, which was just round the corner from our office at Central Quay. So I was sent up with a photographer to go and see what was going on, why there was so much police activity outside this place. And after a lot of hanging around and, questioning people, trying to get a hold of the priest that lived there, we discovered that the police had found the body under the floorboards inside the church. And so I had no idea then that day, 20 years later, I would still be involved in that case, and I would come to know a serial killer better than I knew my own husband. What happened after that, the press managed to glean that the handyman that worked in the church, by going by the name of Pat McLaughlin, had disappeared. and we established that the victim was a young Polish girl, Angelika Kluk, who had come over to try and better her life over in Scotland. At the time, Poland was quite, really poor, wasn't a great lifestyle, and a lot of Poles were coming over to Scotland at that time. And Angelika was one of those, she had dreams like every young girl. She was 22 years old. She had so many dreams. She wanted to go back to Poland and go to university, but she wanted to come over here first and earn some money and have a taste of life in Scotland. And unfortunately, she met a monster, Pat McLaughlin, who we later found out was actually Peter Tobin, was working as a handyman at the church, and he attacked Angelika in the garage, sexually assaulted her, and it was a horrible, violent murder, but it wasn't his usual MO, and he panicked and he left the body. Peter Tobin was the type of killer who would take the body away with him, and he would hide it, conceal it wherever he thought that was the best place it would be discovered. And he panicked with Angelika and he made a mistake, so he bolted. A couple of days later, we discovered that a man fitting his description had turned up to a hospital in London and said he was having a heart attack. And over the years, that would be his MO whenever police wanted to question him, whenever there was any kind of difficulty in his life. That's what he would do. He would feign illness, he would feign strokes, cancer, whatever. Anyway, my involvement in that was, from that day on, I was tasked with investigating Peter Tobin. And I had a lot more freedom than the police officers that were on the original inquiry, because I could travel around the country. I could pull his record, speak to family members, and I was actually, I tracked down 3 of his wives. And I spoke to all 3 of the women, and his son. I discovered that he'd been convicted of sexually assaulting 2 14-year-old girls in England. There was a whole load of stuff, and in fact, the detective in charge of investigating Peter Tobin said that it was because of my work on investigating him that they were able to set up Anagram, because they then decided that this wasn't a first-time kill. This man had killed before, and in the end, it turned out that when Tobin died a couple of years ago, they suspected that he was probably responsible for up to 48 murders. And I know Tom says that Angus Sinclair is probably the most dangerous man that's walked Scotland, but for me, Peter Tobin is up there, probably worse.
For sure. I just want to ask Jane something here. We'll come back to Tobin in a minute or two, because it's Glasgow, there's a lot of conspiracies and all the rest of it that go alongside every case of this nature. What I want to come back to is, tonight our theme is Tom and I as police officers thinking about the landmark cases, and we can see very, very clearly with that gift of hindsight where the changes in procedures and the changes in thinking took place because of these cases. Does the same thing happen with the media? Do they go through a growth and learn lessons like that as well, Jane, as these inquiries go through?
I can only speak to my own experience. There's a fine line.
Let's make it up like Tom.
There's a fine line between entertaining the public and being mindful that at the heart of every story that you do is a victim and a family that are grieving. And, it's a learning curve. I started out as quite an arrogant little upstart who, I would stumble through doors, I would knock doors and speak to people and not give a thought about what I was doing. And then, I learned a very sharp lesson one day when I doorstepped a guy who had just lost his son. And by the end of that visit, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but by the end of that visit, I suddenly realised that I had the power in me to actually do something decent instead of just ruining and being sensationalist. And from that day on, I became a victim-centred journalist, and I was determined that every crime story that I did, I would remember that there was real people at the back of that, and I wasn't playing with emotions. And, Tom always used to go on about the headlines and how sensationalised they were, and people saw the headlines first. And, I would say to him, but counter that with, read the story. Don't look at the headlines, read the story. And, that's when, I suppose, over the years you do evolve as a person. And I think the media now, it's a changing landscape. People don't want to buy newspapers anymore. They're getting it all online. How much of that is accurate is anybody's guess. There's not a lot of journalists like myself left anymore. So I don't know. Yeah, probably.
I think we've gone backwards. Back in 1977, when Helen and Christine were abducted, the local newspaper in Edinburgh, the Edinburgh Evening News, had a team of 6 investigative journalists, and were all very experienced hands. They were good people, and they did a tremendous work, very, very positive work. All that's gone now. And I write for the newspapers. I'm a columnist in the Scotsman, and how my columns are judged is not by circulation, it's not by letters and feedback, it's from the number of clicks the story gets, the headline gets. It's as simple as that. And it's quite interesting because I wrote a short story for another magazine altogether, and the editor came back to me, so that's really good. We've had a lot of comments about it, and it's very, very clear that people read the whole story. And I said, well, is that unusual? He said, oh yeah, of course it is. He said, people now have the attention span of about 30 seconds. And so that's why columns are getting shorter and shorter. That's why I used to write a 900-word column for the Scotsman, and now it's 600 words. And it's getting shorter and shorter because we're all addicted to these. We're all addicted to these, and we're all addicted to headlines. And that's one of the lessons, of course, and that's one of the things we're picking up on Crime Time Inc., because we've got some fabulous stories to tell. And right now, there is a series going out about the Charles Manson murders, the famous murders in Los Angeles, the helter-skelter murders, Sharon Tate and all that stuff. It's a wonderful piece of investigative journalism. That's what it is. A wonderful piece of investigative journalism. But I'm going to be interested in how many people have got the stamina to keep the story. Let me recommend it to you. If you're interested in the history of criminal investigation, then listen to the Manson murders, which is on Crime Time Inc. at the moment. It's an outstanding piece of work.
And I suppose I'll need to say this, it was put together by our producer, editor, water boy, water carrier, Manson fan. Yeah, that tells you everything about Chris Buck, who does all our technical stuff on the podcast. Can you do me a wee favour? And congratulations, by the way, for staying for this long. If you've got a 30-second attention span, that's great. And I've got a column in the National, and it's 700 words. Maybe it's the readers I get. I've got a longer attention span. Can you do me the what? Can you do me a favour and give him a wee round of applause? I don't think he's ever had one in his life. So thanks. And I don't want to hear that on the tape. Right? I want that cut out. No questions. Questions at the end. Go.
Why did Peter Tobin take the bodies away down to the south of England and bury them in the back?
Why did Peter Tobin take the bodies away down south? Let's explain that, where the bodies were found. We didn't really cover that part.
It's about control. It's about control. And they were very sorry. If you look at these 3 men we've discussed, they were all predators. They were all sexually motivated. They all attacked women and young girls. They had a lot in common. And in fact, if you looked at them from a distance, you'd say, well, they're all very similar. And indeed, a lot of people felt they had to be connected because of the very small nature of Scotland and the fact that they're so unusual. Jane's right. Very, very unusual crimes and unusual criminals. But they weren't connected. Not at all. And actually, when you look at the pathology of each individual, they're very, very different. Black was the guided missile, attacked young girls, particularly young girls who were attractively dressed, wee Caroline was in a party dress, Susan Maxwell was in a tennis outfit, took them down south, had his abduction kit in his van, took them down south, and they were probably dead. He probably didn't actually physically murder them. They died from suffocation because of the circumstances he kept them in. It's a horrible thought, but that's the truth of it. These are not fairy stories. This is real life, and some of it's very unpleasant. Now, so he dumped his bodies in one particular place. Angus Sinclair always dumped his victims in places he was familiar with and places he was connected to. And when you looked at the deposition sites of all the women that he murdered, you'd find that he had a connection, that he worked nearby at one time, that he used to go fishing nearby at one time, that he dumped a stolen car there one time. They were all places that were familiar. Tobin always wanted to keep control of his victims, and he kept them, and he actually moved them. He dismembered them and retained them, and he actually moved them sometimes hundreds of miles away and reburied them so that he would always be there and always keep control of his victims. And that's a part of his pathology.
One back garden.
Yeah, where better? Where better for control? Where better?
It was like us.
If I had a dead body to dispose of, especially in the late 70s, early 80s, I'd have taken it up to a guy home at the Campbelltown.
You're now a suspect in the Anna Kenny murder.
Well, not handling that. I took my thing.
The trouble with that is
You're now a suspect in the Anna Kenny murder.
the trouble with that is you're a hostage to fortune. You're a hostage to a dog walker. You're a hostage to a stalker. You're a hostage to some fox unearthing the mortal remains of the person you've murdered. Which is very disturbing for you sitting here. That's the problem with that, is you're out of control. Tobin was a controller. He made a huge mistake with Angelica Kluck, and he wasn't able to control, and he had to leave the body. And of course, that's how he got caught.
Probably because of the police presence. But you've touched on something important here, Chris, from an investigative point of view. And it's something that you all know when I say MO. Everybody knows what that is, don't they? Modus operandi. And we hear it all the time. You hear it on every cop programme. Even Vera, Tom's favourite. The MO is one of the biggest investigative tools that the police have. And we record it. Whenever we catch someone, it's always recorded what their MO is. And that doesn't just apply to what we're talking about here. This is run-of-the-mill house breakings, car thefts, assaults, all sorts of things. People tend to stick to the same methods. And that's the same with serial killers. There's much more to this, the psychology behind it, with the 3 killers that we're talking about tonight. And that's something that I want to come on to with the Tobin case that we're going to finish up with. And we will take questions at the end, by the way, in 5 or 10 minutes. But the Tobin case, his MO aside, is a great example of where the media got involved. The investigators at the time, the senior investigators, had that relationship with the press that we're talking about here, and where public perception became a big problem, and we invented Bible John. Now, a lot of people insist that Tobin must have been Bible John. I'm going to let Tom give you his views on this because they're very well judged, they're well informed for sure, and he'll tell you why he wasn't Bible John.
He wasn't Bible John because Bible John didn't exist. Bible John was a figment of the imagination of a tabloid journalist who, I think the problem there, that there wasn't enough interaction between that particular individual and the senior detectives of the time. As I say, you've got to feed the beast. Somebody down south, if you're in a major investigation, when you're dealing with the press, you've got to feed the beast. You've got to keep feeding the press lines, or they will go out and invent them themselves. And sometimes it won't be lines of inquiry that will do you any good. And Bible John is the classic example of that, of all time probably. Because the Bible John murders, so-called 3 murders, were actually 2 committed by the same man, who was very probably a man called McInnes, John McInnes, who committed suicide a few months after the second murder, and whose DNA was pretty close, but at the time it was examined, it wasn't absolutely certain because we didn't have the technology at the time. And the third murder ascribed to Bible John, in fact, was an outlier committed by somebody completely different. However, what it meant was that detectives, and very good detectives, by the way, very good detectives, the best of their generation, were sent off hunting a serial killer that didn't exist. And it was a salutary lesson to everybody, because I remember in the 1980s, when I was starting to really be senior and investigate murders as a detective inspector, we were always very wary about linking crimes together for fear of creating another Bible John. And so Bible John, or the ghost of Bible John, as I like to say, had a baleful effect on criminal investigation in Scotland all through the 80s, the 90s and the 2000s, because detectives who had been young detectives on the Bible John killings, so-called, were determined not to fall into that trap again.
There's always been a lot of speculation that Peter Tobin was actually Bible John. Well, there's a lot of reasons why he wasn't Bible John, and namely the biggest one was that when the second murder took place in Glasgow, Peter Tobin was on his honeymoon with his first wife. So there was never any evidence to link Peter Tobin to Bible John, other than the fact that he looked like the photo fit that was issued by the police. And when I say photo fit, I mean artist impression. And it was really an artist impression because it was commissioned by the police to a well-known Glasgow artist to paint the picture of the suspect. And if you look at the earlier photo fit of Bible John compared to the artist impression, you have two totally different men. And Peter Tobin does look like the artist painting of Bible John, but there is no evidence to suggest that Peter Tobin was Bible John. And of course, we can't get any evidence on the Bible John murders because unfortunately Strathclyde police lost them.
I get the mic at that point. I was still at school. And that takes us full circle, really, to the world's end. And the lad Lester, what's his first name?
Lester
Nib, who retained that evidence because the foresight there. Sinclair went on to kill a lot of other girls, and I mentioned Anna Kenny when you brought up Argyll and Kintyre because her skeleton was found in 1979 down in Skipness on the way down to Campbelltown. And we now know, although we never managed to prove it, and Tom led the inquiry in 2004 that looked into all these cases. But Jane's absolutely right. I wouldn't say lost. There was, Tom will tell you a bit more about this than I can. But if I say to you that in the 80s, the police were absolutely run off their feet. The resources were incredible. I'll give you an example in Govan where I worked. Nowadays, I checked this just last week, there was 287 crimes on that, what was my old division, the subdivision over there, in the month of December this year, which is traditionally the busiest month of the year. When I was there was over 1,100 crimes every month. And so it's hard to explain what was going on. Tom's already told us all these inquiries were running concurrent with each other. And Jane alluded to the fact that the Mary McLaughlin case, after 2 or 3 months, resources started to dry up as far as the police were concerned. It wouldn't go cold at that point. It's still detectives working on it, but only as much as the leads can come in. You can only do as much as the leads dictate that you're following and eliminate them as you go. But resources have to be spent elsewhere. If you listen to the podcast, you'll hear Tom talking about this. The allocation of resources, very, very difficult when you've got all the things that the police are asked to do now. And people ask me, why is there no policemen on the streets anymore? Has anybody noticed that? Resources. That's the answer to that question. The Federation told me a few months ago in one of our podcasts that over 50%, probably 60% of resources now are taken up with mental health issues at hospitals and that type of thing. So you don't need to look too far to see where the problems lie. And we could go on all night about soft policing and community policing and the man on the beat and how important we think that was to the fabric of our society back in the day. But the main point is that resources were stretched. This is productions we're talking about, evidence, and it wasn't stored properly. That's what I think. It was probably stored somewhere and got left behind in an old police station, or got damp, or a cleaner emptied the cupboard and thought, I'll get rid of all this old stuff. And we lost some very, very vital evidence that would have been useful because of the developments and analysis that had come thereafter. Tom, do you want to reinforce that?
Yeah, just to say that I hate to say this, but Simon's right. In the 1980s, particularly Strathclyde Police was under huge pressure. 100 murders a year, and now there's less than 40 in the whole of Scotland per year. That shows you the state of it. I once worked in the United States and worked in the Chinatown division at New York City NYPD, and they had homicides, and a team of 2 would go out and investigate a murder for 2 days. And if there wasn't any positive leads within 48 hours, the file was closed. Now, we never got to that stage here in Scotland, thankfully, but there was tremendous pressure back then. However, saying that, there is a great rule, and I keep talking about it. If you listen to the podcast, you'll hear me banging on about it. You only need 2 things to succeed in any endeavour: good people and good systems. If you have good people and you don't have good systems, you're wasting your time. If you have good systems and don't have good people, then you're wasting your time. You need the 2. And you have to have good detectives, which they did in Strathclyde, not including Simon, not including Simon. They had very, very good major case detectives in Strathclyde. But at that time, they had inadequate systems for the proper retention of forensic materials. And that's the top and the bottom of it. Okay. Is there anything else to say?
I think we've come to a nice rounding there to let you guys bring up anything you think that's arisen from that, or anything at all. Who listens to the podcast again? You know, the one thing we're short of in the podcast, and it's part of what we're doing here tonight, is feedback. We really need people to go on and tell us what they want to hear about. The Manson case has come out of Chris's obsession. It's the only word for it. But there's all these topics out there that we could be talking about. And we've done a daily podcast. Season 3 was a daily podcast. Crimes from all over the world, Australia, all over. Chris does all the research behind the scenes. He's not getting another round of applause, by the way. 1 a year, that's what you get. Chris puts all that together. So I'd like to open it up a wee bit. Remind you to go on. If you listen to the podcast, I've left a card on every table. Have a wee listen, and if you like it or don't, put a wee comment and let us know what you'd like to hear about. Because there's very few Real Crime Scottish podcasts, and there's none that have got Tom Wood, and you've heard the experience that he's got and the knowledge that he's got. A wee taste of it tonight. Before I open it up, I'll just give him a wee chance to plug his new book, which is getting launched on the 1st of May. Yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
And it's I can't wait to read it because it's about bombing Edinburgh. Who wouldn't want to do that?
You'll perhaps have realised that I'm a little bit interested in the history of criminal investigation down to forensics, and just recently, about 6 months ago, I came across a rare archive of the complete record of all the German bombing raids of Edinburgh on Edinburgh and Leith during the Second World War, included in which was some fantastic quality crime scene photographs, black and white photographs, showing all the bombing raids. And there were 15 or 16 bombing raids over Edinburgh, dozens of people killed, and some great stories. And so to coincide with the 80th anniversary of the end of the war, I'm producing an A4 book, which will be published on the 1st of May, called The Bombing of Edinburgh and Leith. It involves policing, obviously. It doesn't involve criminal investigation, which is a first for me. And I also know that through here, you've got your own history. You've got the Clydebank Blitz, and you've got all the rest of it. So that's the latest adventure. And then there's a book of short stories, which I'm finishing off at the moment. And Jane your book about Mary McLaughlin. Tell us the title and tell us when it's going to be out.
So the book about Mary McLaughlin will be out on July the 3rd, and it's called My Mother's Murder, a Daughter's 35-Year Search for the Truth. And it's written in conjunction with Mary's daughter, Gina, who did spend 35 years trying to solve her mum's murder. And I'm not going to give too much away, but it is an absolutely heart-wrenching story. It's horrific. And it's sad, but it's also, in a way, uplifting. And yeah, that's out July 3rd.
And when is the launch?
July the 3rd?
July the 3rd.
At Waterston.
Switch your thing back on again.
Wrong! The 6th.
July the 6th. It's delayed already.
At Waterston's on Argyle Street.
Yep.
At Waterston's on Argyle Street. The booking's free. Come along.
It's a bit snobby, isn't it? Waterston's Argyle Street. Good. Really?
I'm moving up in the world.
No, us too, you know, that's what's it. And this present company accepted, of course. Hey, any questions for us? Yes. What's your name? Alison. Good. So be excuse for me to come out in the audience as well.
I thought it was really great listening to the stories. I'm just interested in, like, Tom's feelings on, like, his emotions during the investigation.
That's an interesting question because, as far as I'm aware, a deputy chief constable never had any of those things whatsoever.
What are we talking about?
Your emotions.
All right, okay. Well, funny thing is, I had a picture, photograph, the last photograph taken of them in life of Helen and Christine, which hung on my office wall for the best part of 30 years. And I never knew them in life, these girls, but I knew them so well and their families so well. I felt that they were part of the family. I knew them, so intimately. The Caroline Hogue and Susan Maxwell thing was horrifying for me because my daughter was exactly the same age as Caroline Hogue. And many people who were on that investigation, it changed their behaviour, changed it. You became paranoid. When you saw a wee girl walking along the street, you would instantly freeze and you would stop the car and what's going on? It really did change your behaviour and the way you thought. And you also learned very quickly to keep a notepad and a pen beside your bed because you'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning wondering, what did I remember to do this? What about this? And unless you wrote it down, you never get back to sleep. So you do become personally involved. And that's the way it should be, because for any police officer, investigating homicide, investigating murder is the very top of their professional attainment. And we're lucky. We're lucky because most police officers go through a 30-year career and they never become involved in a major case. We have been very, very fortunate over the years in that we have been involved in so many, and it is a professional privilege and a great honour to be asked to be a member of a murder team. And by the way, I've never been a member of a successful or a winning football team or anything else, but it must be a similar feeling to that, of to have such enormous sense of purpose. And I wouldn't change it for the world.
Thanks, Tom. There's a few footballers in here, but they've never had that feeling either. I can assure you of that. Serial killers now as well that I know about. And maybe you did, Andy, I'm not sure. No. What I would add to that is that part of our podcast, we always look, every season we have something that looks at the toll that these cases and police work takes on the individuals that are involved. And it's a very serious problem that we've always had, but we deal with it a bit better now, Tom. Would you agree with that? In our day, we dealt with it with a bottle of whiskey. That was pretty much the therapy that we had. And where we're lucky, having been involved in murder inquiries, and I was in the Serious Crime Squad here in Glasgow, where we're lucky is that we're here to tell the tale. Because there's lots of guys that took a toll on them through the lifestyle, because you become obsessed. It's a real danger when you start working on. When do you go home at night? Why are you not working on a case? wee girl just been abducted. I heard this, Tom said there that it affected everyone involved in the inquiry. I think it affected the whole nation, maybe the whole country. Anyone that heard the story. Because I was talking to a lawyer, a friend of mine, last week, and we were talking about Portobello and Susan Maxwell, and he said that he was in the supermarket in East Kilbride, and he turned to do something and turned round and his daughter wasn't there. And you can imagine the panic. It's probably happened to some of you people in here. Kids can, and when he got her, she was having an ice cream on Portobello Beach. But years and years after the abduction and murder. So these things really change the way we think, they change the way we behave. The World's End was the same. It changed the way people allowed their kids, their teenage kids, freedom to go out and socialise. Or no mobiles in those days, remember? Some of you maybe find that hard to believe. But that's the truth of the matter. Thanks for your question, Alison. Did we answer it okay? Yeah, he's got no emotions at all. Did you get that? Yeah.
Can I just add one thing? What we found with the Caroline Hogg case was because the promenade had been so busy that day, we had instances of what we now recognise as what they call false memory syndrome. And this was mainly women who were on the promenade and felt so burdened by guilt that they had not seen something, that they had not interceded, that they had not somehow saved Caroline. There was a huge pressure on them, that they felt that they had read the newspapers, that they'd seen the TV, and they felt they had actually seen something, or they should have seen something. And so they came forward to give descriptions of things they had seen, not through any malice, but just through psychological pressure and guilt about they had been in the right place and they'd been at the right time and they should have seen something, and they felt very guilty and they felt they had to be part of that role. And it's now recognised as you know, a distinct phenomena. And the first time I came across it was the abduction of Caroline Hogg in July of 1983.
On our podcast, remember I told you at the start, we've got over 200 hours on the podcast. You wouldn't believe the range of subjects, because we're semi-scripted tonight because we know the 3 cases that we wanted to tell you. It's not normally as scripted as that. But the important thing about that is the reason we did it in the first place when the 3 of us met each other is because Tom and I speak to the media regularly. Tom more so than MD else. And you only get to give them a snippet, and they only use what suits their purpose. Jane, would you agree with that? That they take the headline or they take the bit that's of interest to the particular story and the angle that they're coming at it from. And we were both frustrated that you never get to tell the whole story, you never get to discuss the intricate parts of the story and what we see as important from a police perspective. So we started this. So what you get on the podcast is much more in depth than you would ever get through the media, mainstream media, or anything like that. And you get the chance to comment, can leave a voicemail, can leave an email, we've got the website. I think we're on X now, are we? Yeah, we're on X, Facebook. See, not Twitter, X. Getting the hang of it. Questions? Any other wee questions? Yes. Can't be outdone, can you? Thanks. What's your name?
Robert.
Robert.
Did you, Simon, work on the William Beggs murder?
Remind me of it.
The ones in Olympic.
No, I didn't, no.
Did you report on it?
Jane, did you report on William Begg?
William Beggs?
Yes, she did.
Yep.
You got a question? You just want to hear a wee bit about it? Yep. I wasn't going to admit anything there, so I knew what was going on.
William Beggs. About the limbs of the law.
Thought it might be his brother or something.
I was actually just on a documentary on BBC, Limbs in the Lock. William Beggs is a funny one. You never worked on that either, did you?
No, I knew about it because there was some side investigations through our way, but that was a classic case, you see, of how difficult it is to dispose of a body, and people think it's easy and it's not, and they keep popping up, literally,
You should be taking notes at this point.
And that's why I said to Chris there about Tobin and about his ability to control the body. It was only when he changed his MO and he left Angelique Clook that he got caught. Actually, it seems crazy burying a body in your back garden, but that gives you total control, because Beggs put bits and pieces in Loch Lomond, and guess what? They popped up. They were found by accident by the Strathclyde diving unit who were out skiving, probably.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just on William Beggs, I'm going to keep it short and sweet because he's very, very litigious. He likes to sue journalists. He spent his time in prison reading law books, and he thinks that he's a lawyer. All I'm going to say about him is he's an absolute monster of a man. What he did to Barry Wallace and his previous victim was just absolutely horrendous. But I am going to watch what I say, because I don't want these two guys getting lawyers' letters from William Beggs inside.
Thanks very much, Jim. And we know you've got a record anyway. You've been charged with contempt of court and all that stuff. I don't know why we have you here, honest to God.
I've only ever been charged one.
Oh, confession now as well. And I've got all these witnesses, all these credible witnesses. Jim, you're awful quiet for a serial killer. You get any questions? I thought you'd be trying to get some information.
I'm planning my escape route.
Simon, I've got a question.
Good Laura.
Fascinated in the minds of serial killers, and you see them behind what they do.
Right.
Can you point that out?
Yeah, you can chat to him later. I'll introduce you.
From a police point of view, have you found changed your opinion on serial killers in the sense that, are they mentally unwell people? Is it? I'm not saying that what they're doing is not horrific, of course not, but do you think it's from, obviously from an early age? Yeah.
Tom's got some interesting insight here. Again, on the podcast, we throw these things about between us, and Tom comes out with some fascinating stuff because he worked, as he said, with the FBI. And that's where the profiling and the serial killer term was first brought up in America. So Tom can give us some insight into that. But it's very, very interesting that there's commonalities. But we often discuss this. You can see the commonalities. You can imagine what they might be. Mistreated, abused maybe as a kid, things like that in their childhood. When we get to Manson, if you listen to the first episode of Manson tomorrow, yesterday it came on, yeah. So it's online, the first episode now, you'll listen to a really horrific childhood. You could hardly make it up, what he went through. So there are common traits there. But what I always think is there's loads of people went through these things and never became serial killers. There's loads of people lived in poverty, and some of them went on to achieve great things. But Tom's got some insights because of his experience and knowledge with the FBI and serial killers about those traits that stick up all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think once you start to look at the background of all these people, you'll find some things in common about childhood experiences and early years and all that sort of stuff. And all that's very well and good, but you've got to catch them first before that becomes a thing. But I did a lot of work on looking at the connection between Robert Black, Angus Sinclair, and Peter Tobin, because there was a view that statistically it was almost impossible that these three men could have been operating in central Scotland at the same time and offending in such a similar way and yet be unconnected. But they were not connected in any way. However, they had some things in common. One, they were all born in the immediate post-war era in conditions of poverty. Two, they were all born into circumstances and to families and communities where violence was normalised. By that I mean you did not have an argument with someone or a difference of opinion, you hit them or they hit you. So violence was a currency. Thirdly, they were all brought into circumstances and raised in some circumstances where women were denigrated and treated as, I don't think anybody was be treated even as much as a second-class citizen. They were treated with contempt. So there was huge misogyny. Women and girls were seen as objects of their desire and nothing more. So they had these things in common. The other things they had in common, this is going to sound crazy, was that they all had access to reliable and modern methods of transport. Now that's going to sound daft, but if you think the generation before, in the 50s and 60s, people like Black, Tobin and Sinclair would not have had modern, reliable cars. And nor was there the road network that there is today, or that was in the 1970s. So they could flit about. Tobin was a chameleon, changed his identity, changed his name, changed his location, was all over the place. Sinclair had access to modern vehicles always, and in fact the reason he did all these abductions was he had a camper van which was all kitted out as an abduction vehicle. And Robert Black was a delivery driver who had a van, and in that van was a purpose-built and highly efficient abduction kit. He was ready to strike at any time. So that's what they had in common, these three. So they had no connection at all, but yet there are themes running through who these men were. But before you discover all that, you've got to catch them.
Did that answer your question, Laura? Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Oh, I missed somebody up in the corner here. Sorry. That's these pillars. That's what happens when you hide behind a pillar. What's your name?
Shania.
Shania. Lovely name.
Thank you. So you just talked about in terms of DNA, finding skin, semen, blood normally in a crime scene. I just wanted to know, number one, what's the most sort of valuable DNA that you sort of get within the crime scene, and two, what's been the most challenging case that you've come by because of preservation or any DNA difficulties?
From my perspective, it's always hindsight, because I worked on Anna Kenny. I wasn't a detective though. I was in the police about 3 weeks when Anna Kenny's skeletal remains were found in a very remote part of Kintyre near Skipness. And I was so young in service that I was part of the guarding the locus, where I sat in a police caravan all night with another cop who slept soundly through it all. And I think we saw 2 cars that night that drove past. That's how remote. If anybody knows where Skipness, anybody know where it is? Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about, Margaret. It's so remote. That's my involvement in it. So everything that I'm going to say to you about it is that missing at the locus. Hopefully Tom's got that across to you tonight, and I'll let him reinforce it in a second. That first 24 hours, 48 hours of the examination of the locus is the most critical part of the investigation now, 30, 40 years later. And we're having great success, Tom, in the last 10 years. Police Scotland are with these, what we call cold cases, with the cases where the evidence was preserved properly. Because if it wasn't, like in the case of Anna Kenny, then we've no chance. We could never pin it on Sinclair. Although we've got enough now, we could never take it to court, but we've got enough now to rest assured that it was him. I'll take the question to Tom because he's got great insights about DNA as well and how we've developed that over the years.
Yeah, your question about which is the most valuable, quite simply, it's blood or semen. Because it's all about interpretation and how something could have got there. Now, I spoke to you a minute or two ago about low copy number DNA. So, if this dressing gown cord is found at the locus of a murder, and it's got particles, tiny skin particles of my skin on it, I might be able to reasonably explain how that got there, short of it being incriminating for me. But it's much more difficult to explain how my blood and semen got at a locus. You understand me? So it's all about interpretation. And that's what forensic investigators have got a lot better at now. Because in the old days, you would take something up to the scientist and you say, what is that? Oh, that's blood. Okay, that's it. Now, we'll say that's blood, and here's how it may have got there. And they will paint a picture of the circumstances under which it may have got there. And that science has been developed because, believe it or not, of the IRA. Because so many of our Home Office scientists now had experience back in the day of IRA bombs and bombing sites. It's given them tremendous experience about interpretation not just about the DNA, but how it got there and what it might mean. And then, of course, you've got to convince a jury. But it's about interpretation inside the knots of a ligature like that. That's what was convincing in the World's End case and in the Mary McLaughlin case.
Just to wrap up there, Tom was talking about blood, and I remembered an old sergeant of mine. It was in the witness box. And he was asked, and what did you see in the ground? Or he said, I saw some blood on the ground. And the smart-ass solicitor said, are you a doctor, Sergeant? Are you medically qualified? Of course, he said, no. He said, but you're telling us that was blood on the ground. How did you know? They always turn to the jury when they ask you this question, you know, because they think they've got you with the short and curlies. How do you know, Sergeant? Would you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury? I could have been a defence lawyer, couldn't I, really?
You could have been. I wish you had been.
Some folks think I was. Please tell the ladies and the gentlemen of the jury how you know this is blood on the ground, with no medical qualifications. And the sergeant says, well, it's as simple as this. See that table? That's wood, but I'm not a bloody joiner. On that note, can I thank Laura and your staff? You'll thank your staff for us for being your host tonight. Thank you. Courtesy of Chris, she didn't need that much of it, she got more than you. Courtesy of Chris, this will be available on all good platforms within a week or so.
Well, I was told the other day we did 149 podcasts in season 3. I thought, damn, we should have made it 150. Why do we make this one 150?
Deal. Take yours. So, yes, available with all the other, and the subjects are wide and varied. Remember what I said about some feedback on tonight and on all the podcasts as you listen to them. And they're not sequential, but just about every subject is covered under there. But we'd like to hear from you guys.
One last question.
No.
Come on.
Can I stop?
For anyone you want to answer, but if you had to dispose of a dead body...
No, we're not going there, Tom.
Asking for a friend.
You're really worrying.
I'm going to answer you in one word. Pigs.
Oh.
Now, I sense that from the questions that there's some people here who have got a fairly detailed interest in forensics and in criminal investigation. So what I would say to you is, listen to the Charles Manson story. It's for you. It's outstanding. Jane, a last word.
What is the matter with you?
My friend asked me to ask. I don't know why.
You worried me.
I was too embarrassed.
Guys, on behalf of Tom and I, can you help me thank Jane for coming through here tonight to help us out? Again, thank you. And Tom, what can I say about Tom? This is way past his bedtime, guys. I can assure you that. Never got me this time of night, have we? Must be staying over. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks very much.